Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. The cabinet meets for a special session to discuss Lebanon's financial state. Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil urges the issuance of a state budget to solve the financial crisis. Visiting French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault urges Lebanon's political class to assume the responsibilities and resolve the country's political crises. And the United Nations expresses deep concern about increased fighting in Aleppo and calls for humanitarian aid access. The cabinet has met for a special session to discuss the country's financial state. Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil presented a detailed financial report during the session and proposed solutions to prevent the further deterioration of the economy, which is burdened with $71 billion in public debts and an annual $4 billion budget deficit. In a news conference after the meeting, Khalil said a state budget must be issued in order to solve the financial crisis. In his 41-page report, Khalil warned of the repercussions of the worsening political crisis, namely the presidential vacuum on the financial situation and risks posed by the continued random extra budgetary spending in the absence of a state budget. Another cabinet session is scheduled for Thursday to discuss a general agenda. Visiting French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault has urged Lebanon's political class to assume their responsibilities and resolve the country's political crises. Lebanon has been and will remain a priority for France, Ayrault told reporters after a meeting with Prime Minister Tamam Slam at the Grand Sarai on his second day in Beirut. He lamented the complicated political situation in Lebanon, stressing that the crises need to be resolved for the state to be able to confront the challenges and the refugee crisis caused by the war in Syria. The French official later met with Maronite Patriarch Bshara Ra'i and other Maronite officials in Kirki. Ayrault was also set to meet with Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri and his Lebanese counterpart Gibran Bassil later in the day. He will hold a joint news conference with Bassil at the Foreign Ministry at 7 p.m. before departing Lebanon. Lebanese ministers say a new mechanism has been adopted to check the quality of imported wheat, announcing that new tests showed some imported wheat were still unfit for consumption. Health Minister Wael Abu Faour made the announcement in a joint news conference with Agriculture Minister Akram Shayib. Abu Faour said the aftermath of the food safety campaign he launched in November of 2014 led to discussions about the safety of wheat in the country. The consumer safety campaign has shut down a large number of food establishments, pharmacies, clinics, restaurants, mills, hospitals and nurseries for violating health standards. Abu Faour said the health ministry had asked the public prosecution to investigate the presence of high levels of ochratoxin in imported wheats. Radical preacher Ahmed Lassir says he will not cooperate with the military tribunal protesting his treatment at the prison where he is currently held. Assir alleged that his prison cell's cramped conditions have negatively impacted his health and psychological well-being and asked to be moved from the Rihaniya prison in Babda. His defense team is refusing to proceed with the hearing unless he is moved to another cell. Military prosecutor representative Judge Hani Al-Hajjar said in response that the public prosecution was studying the attorney's request to move Assir to another detention facility from both a security and humanitarian aspect. The United Nations said it was deeply concerned about increased fighting in and around the Syrian city of Aleppo and has called for humanitarian aid access and the safe and rapid evacuation of civilians. Opposition fighters have launched a major assault on government-held districts in Aleppo after government forces severed their only remaining supply route into the battleground city. Rebel groups launched the offensive at dawn on Monday to reopen the strategic Castello Road, their last lifeline into the city, according to the AFP news agency. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said 19 regime forces were killed on Monday when rebels blew up a tunnel in the old city. Observatory Chief Rami Abdulrahman said despite a heavy assault, rebels had been unable to advance because of the heavy aerial bombardment the regime is carrying out on the areas where fighting is underway. At least 10 people are killed in a head-on collision of two passenger trains in Italy. That's coming up next. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. At least 9 people were killed and dozens were wounded in a car bombing at an outdoor market in a district just north of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Police said a parked car packed with explosives blew up this morning at a vegetable and fruit market in Rashidiyah town. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, which wounded at least 20 people. Baghdad has been on high alert for attacks after a blast in the central Karada district on July 3rd killed more than 300 people. Today's bombing in Rashidiyah came as the Iraqi parliament was due to discuss security measures in the capital in the wake of the attack in Karada. Britain will not rush to trigger divorce proceedings with the European Union. A leading ally of incoming Prime Minister Theresa May said as David Cameron bowed out at his final cabinet meeting. May 59 will replace Cameron on Wednesday, who was resigning after Britons rejected his advice and voted on June 23rd to quit the EU, plunging the country into political and economic uncertainty. May will face the enormous task of disentangling Britain from a forest of EU laws accumulated over more than 4 decades. She will also negotiate new trade terms while limiting potential damage to the economy. At least 10 people have been killed and dozens injured in a head-on collision of two passenger trains in southern Italy. The two trains crashed on a single track near the town of Andria in the Puglia region. A photo of the crash showed cars crumpled together and forced off the tracks at sharp angles. Ambulances, firefighters and police officers rushed to the scene, helping to free passengers from the carriage and pulling victims from the rubble, including a small child who was alive. Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi said the train crash was a moment of tears and pledged that investigations will not stop until a cause was determined. And still in Europe, 5 people were treated for minor injuries, but there were no gorings at the 6th San Fermin bull run this year in the northern Spanish city of Pamplona. Animals weighing around 650 kilos race after runners from around the world, many wearing a white shirt and red scarf, through the narrow streets of Pamplona each morning during the 9-day summer festival. The run featured specially bred bulls from the Victoriano de Rio ranch, and the 875-meter dash from Pen to Pamplona Bull Ring lasted just 2 minutes 13 seconds, the fastest so far this year. The lawyers of imprisoned U.S. Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning have confirmed that she attempted to kill herself in jail last week. Manning, the 28-year-old transgender soldier, is serving a 35-year sentence after she was convicted in 2013 of leaking more than 700,000 secret military and U.S. State Department documents to anti-secrecy website WikiLeaks. The soldier's legal team released a statement on Monday saying that Manning's attempt to take her own life was unsuccessful. Her lawyers also accused the U.S. military of violating her privacy by publicly revealing that she had been admitted to hospital. An arbitration tribunal in The Hague has rejected China's claims to economic rights across large swathes of the South China Sea, in a ruling that will be claimed as a victory by the Philippines. The UN-backed Parliament Court of Arbitration said there was no legal basis for China to claim historic rights to resources within the sea areas falling within the 9-dash line, referring to a demarcation line on a 1947 map of the sea. The South China Sea is a resource-rich strategic waterway through which more than $5 trillion of world trade is shipped each year. More details in this report.
China Sea, a group of mostly uninhabited islands, atolls and reefs, are at the heart of a fierce territorial dispute. Most are located in 2 island chains, the Paracel Archipelago contested by China, Taiwan and Vietnam, and the Spratly Islands disputed between China, Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia and Brunei. Surrounded by waters teeming with fish and potentially rich in oil and gas resources, the islands are also strategically placed on a global trading route. Beijing claims sovereignty over nearly all the sea using a map from the 1940s before the separation with Taiwan, which set out for the first time China's territorial claims. Beijing seized the paracels from it in 1974 following deadly clashes. Vietnam claims ancestral sovereignty over the archipelago and accuses China of harassing its ships, an accusation which Beijing reciprocates. The Philippines, which has also clashed frequently with China over another reef, the Scarborough Shoal, has brought a case against Beijing before the UN-backed Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. Many parties involved in the dispute have established physical control of one or more islands. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan and Brunei have overlapping disputes, but all are concerned by China's military might. Beijing has stepped up oil and gas exploration and built up a series of artificial islands now home to harbours and runways for military aircraft. To offset Chinese influence, third-party countries like the United States and Japan have reinforced military ties with Hanoi, Manila and Taiwan, lifting arms embargoes, joint naval operations or defence treaties. Washington has carried out sail-bys and flypasts to assert its right to freedom of navigation in the area, an issue in which it is backed by Australia and Japan. The territorial disputes already claimed lives as well as impacting the environment. The lack of communal maritime management has prompted concerns about overfishing.
Tests on worms and mice have shown that intestinal bacteria transforms a molecule contained in pomegranates to dramatically slow down the aging of muscles. Scientists from Swiss Research Institute EPFL have established a startup company, Amazentis SA, to develop the research into a medicine to help counteract age-related muscle decline. Sharon Reich reports.
A pomegranate a day won't keep the doctor away, but scientists from Swiss Research Institute EPFL say they've shown that the superfood may help counteract some of the effects of aging. Study co-author Patrick Abischer.
Work in our laboratory discovered a totally new mechanism about how the substances in this fruit work and actually counteract aging and aging-related disease. It's totally new in the fact that the mechanism exposed is not related to any of the old and known anti-aging mechanisms, but depends on a new mechanism which is called mitophagy.
As we age, the process of mitophagy, or cell renewal, slows down. This causes dysfunctional mitochondria, which leads to problems such as muscle weakness. Abischer says that when pomegranate seeds are ingested, a microbe inside them interacts with the bacteria living in our gut to form what's called urolithin A, which seems to jumpstart the cell renewal process.
Our work showed for the first time the importance of mitophagy in the aging process. And in addition, we provided a compound contained in a natural product, the pomegranate, that could activate mitophagy and hence curb age-related disease as frailty, sarcopenia, or metabolic diseases linked with aging.
In lab tests, worms exposed to urolithin A lived 50% longer, while the endurance of mice improved by 40% while running. The pomegranate is one of several so-called superfoods to be dubbed superfads by many in the medical profession who prefer to promote a balanced diet. The team hopes tests on humans, currently underway, could help change that opinion.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The cabinet meets for a special session to discuss Lebanon's financial state. Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil urges the issuance of a state budget to solve the financial crisis. Visiting French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault urges Lebanon's political class to assume the responsibilities and resolve the country's political crises. And the United Nations expresses deep concern about increased fighting in Aleppo and calls for humanitarian aid access. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Samina. Thank you all for tuning in.